You've seen them at the dinner table. Someone asks a simple question, "What do you want for dinner?" And they're still deliberating 20 minutes later, still running through scenarios, still weighing consequences. Psychologists have a name for people like this, and it's not just being indecisive. Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover explains why some brains won't let things go, and honestly, it might change how you judge people who take forever to make decisions. You know them. Your friend who texts you asking if they should text their crush, then spends an hour crafting the message. Your colleague who rewrites the same email 5 times before sending. The person who replays a conversation from 3 days ago and realizes what they should have said instead. These are the overthinkers, and their brains might actually be running a completely different operating system than yours. Here's the thing about overthinking. It feels like a choice. It feels like laziness or anxiety or indecision. But it's not. Overthinkers aren't choosing to spiral. Their brain is literally designed to loop, to revisit, to explore every possible angle. And that's actually not a flaw in the system. It's a feature. Let's start with what's happening neurologically. People who overthink show higher activation in the default mode network. That's the brain system that activates when you're not focused on the external world. Overthinkers are living partially in their internal mental space, always. When they're eating, part of their brain is still 3 conversations back, analyzing tone and implication. When they're supposed to be working, their prefrontal cortex is running simulations of potential outcomes. Here's where it gets interesting. Research on rumination, psychological jargon for repetitive thinking, shows it's not actually about intelligence. High IQ individuals aren't necessarily more prone to overthinking than anyone else, but people with high emotional sensitivity absolutely are. They're absorbing more social data, they're picking up on subtle cues other people miss. The slight change in someone's tone, the delay in a text response, the micro-expression that lasted half a second. Their brain is a finely tuned instrument picking up signals from everywhere, and then it's trying to make sense of all that input. So the overthinker isn't lazy. They're processing more information than the average person, and their brain refuses to settle on a conclusion until it's examined every possible interpretation. But why would brains evolve this way? Plot twist. Overthinkers might be humanity's quality control inspectors. Throughout history, the person who checked twice before crossing the river was less likely to get swept away. The person who thought through all the angles before committing to a hunt was more likely to come home alive. The person who replayed social interactions was building a complex map of tribal hierarchy and alliances, critical survival information. This connects to something called harm avoidance. It's a personality dimension where people are highly motivated to prevent negative outcomes. Not because they're anxious, well, some are, but because their brain's threat detection system is genuinely more sensitive. They see more potential problems, and they're trying to solve them before they happen. There's even a genetic component. The serotonin transporter gene, sometimes called the worry gene, influences how much serotonin gets reabsorbed in the brain. People with certain variants literally have different neurochemistry, creating a predisposition toward deeper processing, and yes, sometimes overthinking. But again, this isn't a disorder, it's a variation. Some people's brains are built to quickly skim the surface. Other people's brains go deep. Now here's where overthinking gets complicated, because there's actually more than one type of overthinking happening, and they're psychologically very different. Type 1 is analytical overthinking. These people are problem solving. Their brain is generating solutions, weighing options, thinking through logistics. An overthinker deciding what to wear isn't being indecisive. They're considering the weather, what message their outfit sends, how they'll feel in it, whether they'll need to move around. This type of overthinking is actually productive. It leads to better decisions. Type 2 is rumination. This is the overthinking that doesn't solve anything. It's replaying conversations you can't change, imagining catastrophic futures that will probably never happen. Dissecting why someone looked at you weird 3 months ago. This is suffering wearing the costume of productivity. This is what most people mean when they complain about their overthinking habits. Type 3 is existential overthinking. These people aren't stuck on daily decisions or past conversations. Their brain goes way up. They're questioning meaning, purpose, identity, mortality. They're thinking about how their choices ripple into the future. This type of overthinking often correlates with depression and anxiety, but it also correlates with creativity, philosophy, and deeper human connection. The psychological difference between these types matters because they require different interventions. You don't solve analytical overthinking, you harness it. You don't solve rumination through logic, you interrupt the loop. You don't solve existential overthinking by ignoring the questions, you explore them. But here's what all three types have in common. They all feel terrible to the person experiencing them. Even analytical overthinking, even when it leads to good decisions, comes with a cost. There's the time cost, there's the decision fatigue, there's the anxiety of not being able to switch your brain off. An overthinker can feel exhausted even when they're resting, because their mind isn't actually resting. Research on decision paralysis shows that people who consider more options actually report lower satisfaction with their final choice. This is the paradox of the overthinker. The more angles you examine, the more downsides you see. The more possibilities you consider, the more you notice what you're sacrificing. You end up making decent choices, but feeling worse about them. There's also a social cost. When you're stuck in your head, you're not fully present with other people. You're half listening because you're also listening to the conversation in your brain. You're delayed in responding because you're still processing the previous statement. Other people experience this as aloofness or disinterest. The overthinker is actually drowning in engagement, just not with the current moment. And then there's the judgment problem. Society doesn't have patience for overthinkers. In a culture that valorizes quick decisions and confidence, the person who takes time to think looks weak, indecisive, anxious. We've all internalized the message that being certain is the same as being competent, so overthinkers hide it. They fake decisiveness. They pretend they know things they're still thinking about, and that creates this exhausting double process. Not only are they overthinking, they're also performing not overthinking. But here's where I need to be honest with you. Not all overthinking is noble internal processing. Some of it is avoidance dressed up as deliberation. Some of it is anxiety performing as analysis. There's a type of overthinker who's actually afraid to make a decision because then they can't blame fate or circumstances. As long as they're still thinking, they can't fail. As long as they haven't committed, the best possible version of their life still exists in the realm of possibility. This is where overthinkers and procrastinators often overlap. It's not that they can't decide, it's that deciding creates finality. And finality means accepting that you won't get to live the other version of your life, that you're not perfect, that your choice might have been wrong. So they think instead, they ruminate, they delay. And the thinking feels productive because at least they're doing something. The uncomfortable question is, do you overthink because you're genuinely processing complex information, or do you overthink because you're afraid? Here's what makes this hard to untangle. Both things can be true simultaneously. Your brain genuinely is processing more information, and you're also using that processing as a shield against commitment. But research on action taking reveals something interesting. People who overthink but still make decisions report higher life satisfaction than people who overthink and stay paralyzed. The key variable isn't how much you think, it's whether you eventually act. Because thinking without action is just suffering in disguise. There's also fascinating research on the satisficing principle, the art of deciding when you've thought enough. Most people actually have an intuitive sense of this. They reach a point where the analysis starts repeating itself, where new information stops changing the answer, where more thinking would be counterproductive. Overthinkers often miss this signal. Their threshold for enough thinking is much higher. Sometimes it doesn't exist at all. Now, the real question everyone wants answered, are overthinkers happier? Can you train your brain to overthink less? The research here is both hopeful and humble. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which teaches people to interrupt rumination loops, does work, but it requires practice. It requires catching yourself mid-spiral and choosing a different mental path. And it requires accepting that some overthinking is just how your brain works. You're not trying to eliminate it, you're trying to direct it. Some overthinkers report that once they accept their nature, once they stop fighting their own mind, things actually get easier. There's less self-judgment, less frustration about why they can't think like normal people. They learn to use their overthinking for writing, research, strategy, therapy, philosophy. They find domains where deep thinking is an asset instead of a liability. Others find that the anxiety underneath the overthinking requires deeper treatment, because for some people, overthinking isn't a personality style. It's a symptom of generalized anxiety disorder or obsessive compulsive patterns. And those do require professional intervention. But here's what the psychology actually tells us. People who overthink aren't broken. They're not lazy. They're not indecisive. They're operating with a different processing speed and depth. Some brains are built to quickly categorize and move on. Other brains run on a system that says, let me think about this from every angle. Neither system is superior. They're just different. The problems start when overthinkers believe there's something wrong with them, when they internalize the message that they should be faster, more decisive, more confident. Because then they're not just overthinking, they're also hating themselves for overthinking. They're anxious about their anxiety. They're ruminating about their rumination. And that's when the spiral gets truly painful. True freedom for an overthinker isn't eliminating the overthinking. It's learning to think deeply without the judgment, to analyze without the shame, to spend time in your head without believing something is wrong with you for being there. There's a question worth asking yourself. If you suddenly became the type of person who made quick decisions without much deliberation, would you actually be happier, or would you just make faster mistakes while feeling less guilty about them? Because here's what nobody wants to admit. The person who decides in 5 minutes and never second guesses themselves isn't more enlightened. They're just not processing the same amount of information. That can lead to simpler life and fewer regrets. Or it can lead to repeated mistakes because you never learn to question yourself. The overthinker's superpower, if they could harness it without the suffering, is the ability to see complexity, to hold multiple perspectives, to understand nuance, to anticipate problems. These are actually rare and valuable abilities. The question is whether they can access those abilities without the paralysis and self-judgment that usually comes with them. So here's what I want you to take away. If you're an overthinker, you're not broken. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. You're just operating with a different setup. Your job isn't to become someone else. Your job is to learn how to use your deep processing mind without letting it use you. To set boundaries on the rumination while respecting the analysis. To make decisions and then commit to them even though you can still see all the angles you didn't choose. And if you're not an overthinker, maybe don't judge the people who are. When someone's taking a long time to decide, they're not being weak. They're often trying to be thorough. When someone keeps bringing up the same topic, they're not being anxious. They're trying to make sense of something. When someone replays conversations in their head, they're not being neurotic. They're building a complex understanding of human interaction. We need both types of thinkers. We need the quick decision makers. We need the deep thinkers. We need the people who see the big picture and the people who notice the details everyone else missed. A world where everyone overthought everything would be paralyzed. A world where no one overthought anything would be reckless. The real skill for everyone is knowing when to think and when to act, when to analyze and when to commit, when to stay in your head and when to come back to the present moment. That's not something your brain type determines. That's something you learn. So are you an overthinker? Let me know in the comments. And if you are, tell me what you overthink about most. Does it help you or hurt you? I'm genuinely curious. And if you're not an overthinker, maybe comment on what it's like being in your head less. Because I think overthinkers secretly wonder what that's like. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe or click join to support the channel. Your support genuinely helps us keep making these videos. And check out this next video if you want to understand the psychology of procrastination, because it connects to everything we just talked about.